We continue our conversations with all 17 of the candidates on the ballot for Denver mayor with former state senator Mike Johnson. Welcome back to Next.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You have said that you will end homelessness in your first term. It takes a lot of confidence to say that you are going to do something that no major American city has ever done. Is that an honest and a realistic pledge?
It is. I think the benefit is we've learned so much over the last 10 years that people didn't know before. I think everyone's made a hard, honest effort at it. I think we've developed some core understandings of what has worked, and we've seen examples that do work. And so for me, the three basic insights are, one, we need to build these micro communities, which are 40 to 50 tiny homes or hotel conversions, where you can move people and then you can wrap around the services they need: mental health, addiction treatment, security, workforce training. And the third part of that is that we've missed often is you then have to understand the way community works with folks who are unhoused, which is you can't offer one person in an encampment of 12 people a unit and think they'll take it. The power of these micro communities is when you have 40 or 50 units and you open them at once, you can go to 3 or 4 blocks of encampments where people have community and say, we're going to move you as a community together to a new site where we know you can be very successful. Colorado Coalition for the Homeless has done this. Colorado Village Collaborative has done this, and they've seen tremendous results. In fact, for Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, 300 people that they moved, and a year later, 86% of them were housed. And so we know this can work, and innovators in Denver have shown that it works. We just need a mayor to put the resources and the leadership behind doing it at scale.
I've heard a criticism of that plan from others in the campaign that for the amount of money you put into doing that, you should just build permanent housing.
No, actually, that's the mistake that places like San Francisco make, which is if you build permanent housing, that costs about $500,000 per unit to do that, and it takes 3 or 4 years to do it. A tiny home costs $20,000 to $25,000, and you can build it in 5 or 6 days, which means you can do it for $40 million of federal funding one time, and you can provide the ongoing wraparound services on those sites with our Proposition 123 money. So this is actually much less expensive probably than what we're doing now, and probably saves the city money from how we're currently doing it, which is trying to provide services to people in 1,400 different places every given night is much, much harder.
So what we've seen with the Colorado Village Collaborative's tiny home villages is that they have only set up for like 6 months or 12 months at a time in various locations. And for all neighbors' fears about what might happen, most of these sites have been pretty well received at the end of the day. Would you envision these sites be permanent? Would they also be moving? How would that work?
I think we're open to getting community feedback on this. I think what you said is the most important. Is a lot of folks say, what neighborhoods are going to want this and won't they be terrified? And after they go in, they actually say, we're surprised by how well this has worked. I went to one of the sites and talked to the resident there about, what do you do for cooking every night? Someone make a grocery run? Someone cooks Monday, Tuesday? And he laughed and said, honestly, we have more food than we can eat because Monday night the local church comes, and Tuesday night the local grandma's club comes, and Wednesdays the Lions Club comes. I mean, communities have really adopted in these places as part of their neighborhood when you do it the right way.
So when we talk about the idea of ending homelessness, this big audacious pledge that you have, let's talk about how many people we're talking about. You're talking about unsheltered homelessness,
yes,
or are you talking about homelessness in total?
I'm talking about unsheltered homelessness,
okay,
and chronic unsheltered homelessness as the most visible reality of what we see, which is the about 1,400 people that are out in the streets on any given night.
Okay, 1,400 people. So the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness says that they've identified only 4 communities in the U.S. that they believe have solved chronic homelessness. And they're all relatively small communities, nobody with the population like Denver has. But one thing that they've done in some of those places is they've done by name lists,
yes,
where they literally name every person and what that person's needs are that they can connect them with. Could Denver do a by name list?
Yeah, you can. And actually, there's a partnership like this already started in the metro area. Project Zero is the name of the people that do this. And it does have the kind of individual case management you need to be able to get people the services they need. Because if you know them by name, you know what their needs are, you know how to connect them. So I do think that is part of what you can do. And it's what you can do when you have these micro communities. Because if you just have, it's like being a school teacher. If you just have 40 people in your micro community and you have 8 to 10 staff members that are there, they have ongoing personal relationships with those individuals to figure out what they need and how to connect them to services. I think that is the kind of personal relationships we've seen that have worked in the cities that have done this. A little smaller than ours, but they have done it.
Denver's going to spend about $250 million on homelessness initiatives. Do we need more money or just a new approach?
I don't believe we need more money. I do think part of why I led and passed Proposition 123 is it does provide ongoing permanent funding for Denver for homelessness. It's about $10 million more a year. That's what we would need to staff these sites. But the resources are there. Denver has been generous to the taxpayers have to solve these. With the resources we have and the right leadership and scaling what we know works, we can solve it, I think, with the resources we have.
There are other candidates in the race that are also saying that they will end unsanctioned campsites. One of them's Kelly Brough. She says she can do it in a year. She says as a last resort, she'll arrest people for violating the urban camping ban. You think that you can also end encampments without arresting anybody for the camping ban.
Yeah, arresting people who are homeless is not the answer, and it's also not legal in most places, and so I think that's not the right strategy, nor do I think moving people from one set of tents to another set of tents is the answer either. That's not the kind of safe, stable, protected environments people want to live in, so I don't think that's the path. I think the path is to actually provide people access to housing that is stable and safe and protected, and we know when that's available, they take it dramatically. When people talk about, oh, folks don't want to go into housing, I've talked to a lot of folks around house who say, yeah, I don't want to go to a shelter because those shelters can be dangerous, they can be unsafe. I'm not sure if I might rather choose the street over that. But when you offer people actually a dignified, stable home with their own bed and their own desk and their own chair, that they're very, very eager to take that option.
You and a bunch of candidates in the race are making this bet that people will take the housing or the enhanced shelter if they're offered it. What happens to the folks who are service resistant and say no? Because there's about 6 candidates in the race who say if push comes to shove, we'll arrest people. You're saying we won't do that. So then what happens with those highly service-resistant folks?
Yeah, we won't arrest people that haven't committed crimes. You know, if you've committed a crime, then yes, you can be arrested. There are some people that are service-resistant that are so actively mentally ill that they are going to commit assault or they're going to commit robbery or they're going to have charges. This is why my focus has been how do you rework the criminal justice system to actually give people the services they need. So I've come out and said what we should do is take 2 pods at the county jail out on Smith Road and convert one of those into a long-term inpatient mental health facility because we don't have long-term mental health beds right now, and one of those into long-term addiction-based treatment so you can get real, responsive, reliable treatment, and then people can get healthy and get back up on their feet and on the street. So if you do have criminal charges, but your real underlying needs are mental health or addiction, now we'd actually have a place to send you. We use the mental health courts or the drug courts to be able to sentence you and place you in a place where you'll actually get treatment and get better. That's where I would focus the interventions with the treatment people need.
You've called for more of a crackdown on low-level offenses that make people feel unsafe in public places, things like harassment and public drug use. You've also said that you want to see those low-level convictions expunged from people's records so that it doesn't stick with them long-term. Yeah. In the interim, though, aren't you going to stress an understaffed sheriff's office or sheriff's department if you're sending a bunch more people through for low-level offenses?
We do need to staff up both the sheriff's office and the police department, and I've called to do that. I've said I'd put 200 more first responders onto the street. I say that because there are different scenarios that require different responses. Sometimes you need officers, but if you have someone in a mental health crisis, you should send a mental health worker. If you have someone in a physical health crisis because they're potentially in an overdose, you should send an EMT. And those officers that we do have out on the streets, we want to have actually doing old school community policing. We want you out walking a beat, talking to neighbors, talking to business leaders, building relationships, creating a sense of connection, not feeling like people are in paramilitary uniforms behind a cruiser. We want them to be out in the neighborhoods being present for people.
You've talked about 200 more first responders on the street. How many of those are uniformed DPD officers?
I think it's somewhere around 130 to 150, and about 50 to 60 or so would be mental health workers and or EMTs.
As we sat down for this conversation, we saw the first reports come in that Luis Garcia, the East High student shot outside school a couple weeks ago, has passed away. It's a conversation that's being led in part by other East High students, his classmates, who want Denver police officers to return to schools. You've said it should be up to individual principals. It's not the mayor's decision. If the school board is still resistant to the idea of DPD officers in schools, what can the mayor do unilaterally?
Yeah, I thought about this today. I mean, I feel like if school communities are saying we want school resource officers and somehow the ideology of the school board is saying we won't let you have it, I think as a mayor, my job is to make sure those schools are safe. And so if we need to partner with the DPD directly to partner with school principals or school communities to provide that safety, we should provide it. No parent should worry that when their kid goes to school, they're going to get shot outside of their own high school. And I feel like as a mayor, we have to make sure to deliver on that. And so if the school board wouldn't, I would find a way to make sure communities felt safe in their own high schools.
You have a way to get DPD into schools if the school board says no?
I don't know. We'd have to figure that out. I've never had to solve that problem before. I would think that the school district itself would say if communities are overwhelmingly asking for this kind of protection, we should be able to let them choose to have it. If they don't, I'm not going to stand back and have parents feel like their kids are unsafe in high schools. We'd find a way to partner. Maybe we're helping support the outside of the buildings, not the inside, but people should feel like we're going to be responsive to that core need of safety.
You've spent a lot of your career in education and in education reform. Given the mess that is currently Denver Public Schools, is there not some part of you that wants to work with the state legislature or whatever you have to do to put DPS under mayoral control so that you could have a hand in that education reform?
I think there's a way to build partnerships with the mayor and the city to be able to make it work more effectively. I do think the mayor's got to be much more involved, and there are kind of three big things I would do. One is I think the mayor's got to be more involved in helping kids get access to after school and summer school programming. We know right now about 70% of a kid's learning time is actually outside of the 8 to 3 school day, so I want to expand a program that would give kids access to tutoring or art enrichment or robotics, the things that our kids get to do because we can pay for them. The second is we know there's a real crisis in mental health access for kids, particularly in high school, way more demand than we can meet. Would work with Donnelly at Denver Health to expand our school-based health clinics that can do that. And the third is I do think it's the role of the mayor to, in very low visibility school board elections, to advocate for candidates who will do a responsible job, not leading an ideological school board, but leading a practical one that's going to help principals and teachers do their jobs. And I think principals and teachers are frustrated that it feels chaotic right now. And I think part of the job as the mayor is to make sure people focus on those elections and get those decisions right.
What is your assessment of the Denver School Board and the leadership now?
I think it has become far more ideological and far less functional. And I think the reality is our core purpose as a school board is to support teaching and learning, to support principals and teachers getting the resources they need to deliver high quality instruction and to deliver safety. And there's a lot of debate that doesn't lead to that. And I think it's not a good model for kids when you have adults who aren't able to meet in a room and converse publicly without having to have a mediator to intervene. I think that doesn't show good models for kids on how to solve hard problems. I think we can do better.
You want to add 25,000 affordable housing units in the city. Where?
Yeah, I mean, the key is there are places where we can really add density in the city. We'll need to do that. This is why I've supported the Park Hill Golf Course as one example. That's 600 new permanently affordable units. That increases the amount of affordable homes in the city by almost 20%.
Can I follow up on that before you move to the broader point?
Sure.
There are critics of that deal who don't want a golf course. They want it developed, but they don't think that the city is asking enough of the developer of Westside. You think the citizens of Denver are getting a good enough deal out of the development there?
Yeah, what I've said to people is I've only weighed in on this as a voter because all I get right now is a yes or no vote on April 4th. So would I have built a different deal 3 years ago if I were the mayor? Yeah, I probably would have. On the vote that's offered to me, which is do you vote yes on affordable housing, a 100-acre park, and a grocery store, or do you vote no and get back by law an 18-hole golf course? And that binary choice, I'll take option A. Yeah, if we had time to go back in time and rebuild it, I think there are things we would have done differently. But on the merits of the two choices, I take the yes because it actually drives the point around affordable housing. And this is what I think you're calling attention to. You can't say you're for affordable housing and then be opposed each time someone's going to actually build affordable housing units. You do have to be able to site them someplace. And I think that means places like transit-oriented development, yeah, you want to do real density. This is also right next to a light rail stop, so it's a good place for density, just like in my neighborhood in Central Park. A lot of density going up on Central Park Boulevard right next to that light rail, and that's how it should happen. That doesn't mean you need 20-story skyscrapers in every building. It doesn't in every neighborhood. You don't. But we can add gentle density around the city, and there's still a lot of open lots we can use. We just got to be thoughtful about how, when we're developing for more density.
One of the things that you've talked about in terms of ways to add more density is to reduce the parking requirements for new developers, where they've got to have a certain number of parking spots for a certain number of units. And you've said around mass transit, then maybe we don't need to have those requirements, make it easier to put in transit, to put in more density near transit. Does RTD have the reliability and the frequency that's needed to actually support that?
This is, I think, part of the challenge. I think, yes, we do want to do that because we want to make it easier for people to use transit. We also have to make transit more reliable and more frequent because right now we know a lot of people aren't using it because they don't know when it'll get there or if they'll get there on time. And Kyle, they're not always sure if it's going to be safe. I've had folks who say, I don't take the A-line anymore because I put my mom on it one time and there was someone smoking fentanyl on it and that makes me feel unsafe. So I think it is about providing safety there, providing stability and frequency, and the city's got to be an active partner in making sure those routes run on time and they run more frequently so people can rely on getting it to work on that. I think if we make it more reliable, we'll get more use.
So what is the city's role in that? Because it seems like there's kind of two schools of thought. There's the support RTD and there's the layer over RTD. With city-owned or run transit. What are your thoughts on that long term?
I mean, I think we're still the biggest consumer and the biggest partner in RTD, so we should first go in as a goodwill partner to say we want to deliver higher quality services and we want to work with you to get that done, and we'll put some of our skin in the game, but you got to put some of yours. But then there are places where it makes sense for the city to supplement. When you do little circulators in a place like Montbello where that might not be an RTD need, but we do want to make it easier for folks to be able to get around their neighborhoods without having to get in their car. I think we can supplement in some places, but I'd like to work with RTD to make this system work better for Denver residents first before we start working around them.
So if we can be honest, you're somewhat aggravatingly optimistic about things. You're kind of like, you're a big hope guy, like that's your thing, that's your brand. how does that optimistic outlook, the whole we can solve every problem, we can tackle everything, translate in a year where most Denverite polled think that the city's going in the wrong direction? And there are a lot of candidates in this race that have a really dark view of what's going on with homelessness and with crime.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I had a mentor who used to teach me this, used to say, there are only two things you can offer to children when I was a teacher. She'd say you can offer truth and you can offer hope. But if you don't tell them the truth, they're in search for a world that doesn't exist. If you don't give them some sense of hope, they don't look for that world at all. There are, of course, hard truths we got to face. I'm facing those hard truths. Yes, we have the worst city in the country for auto theft. Yes, we have 1,400 people who are unhoused. Yes, teachers and nurses can't afford to live here. Those are all true. The hopeful part for me is those are also all solvable problems. I think the despair is when you believe those truths overwhelm the hope. I acknowledge the truths. I think I've seen enough and worked with enough partners who figured out solutions on those that I know there are ways for us to get out of that. And for me, that's the hopeful part.
One last question. I try to finish with everybody with just a pure politics, pure horse race kind of question here. So you're coming to this race off of two prominent races that you did not win. They're Democratic primaries for U.S. Senate and for governor. First horse race question for you. What did you learn from those races that you bring to this race? Any difference in approach?
I learned a lot. I think I learned more from being out of politics the last 4 years than I probably did from those races. I learned a lot from being the CEO at Gary Ventures and having to be a business trying to partner with downtown, having to live and work downtown, and working on things like homelessness and housing where I found solutions that really worked. So I think I've learned more that I like being an executive. I like actually building a vision, running a team, and executing on that. And I think that is what the city is looking for right now, is who is someone who has real progressive values, but actually knows how to run and lead large organizations and is meticulous about delivering results. And that's the part of the job that I did last that I love the most. That's the part I love about this job.
That was a masterful dodge of my questions about those two last campaigns, but that's fair. It actually brings me to my last question.
I'm happy to go back to it.
No, it's fun. About the idea of where you fit into this race more broadly.
Yep.
When you kind of look at this race from an outside perspective, there is a fairly small, deeply progressive lane of candidates in this race. Think about folks like Lisa Calderon, Ian Tafoya, Jim Walsh. Maybe Leslie Herod is in that lane, not really sure. And then there's a lane of kind of folks offering a hardline approach to crime and to homelessness. Whether you want to call that center left or center right, whatever. That's a crowded lane of people. That's Kelly Ruff, and you probably put Chris Hansen in that lane, Trini Rodriguez, Kwame Spearman, a bunch of other folks. You're a little bit tougher to pin down, and Leslie Herrod's a little bit tougher to pin down. Where do you see yourself fitting into the race? And are you surprised that there's so many people in the hardcore law and order camp this year?
I am, and the reason I think why I guess I'm surprised is I think that means those folks haven't done the deep work to figure out how you actually solve these problems. I view myself as someone who wants to accomplish real progressive ends, but know what it means to actually build a plan to deliver results on that. And so in things like homelessness and housing, I know you're not going to solve that problem by arresting people who are homeless, because I know what happens next when they show up in jail and they have no place to go, and then they come back out and it's not successful. So I view myself as someone who has a real track record of building really broad coalitions to solve hard problems. And when you've done that, you realize that's not ideological. That's much more practical, and that requires figuring out what works and figuring out how to scale what works. And I think that's where I've spent my time, and that's what I think is possible for the city. But it's less about ideology and more about delivering outcomes.
Mike Justin, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.